Good morning, everyone. I've been rebuilding rear ends for probably 35 years. And it gets to a point in a man's life where you go, enough is enough. It is very difficult to build high quality, dependable differentials that is going to last. And I build a lot of them. But what I wanted to go over today is not the real Eaton posies, but the fake ones. Ones that are produced by Yukon, Nitro Gear, Summit Racing, Monkey Grip, and some of these brands that you see that are on eBay, where they call them now limited slip locker. $190, $195, shipped, free shipping to your door. And unfortunately for me to build one of these is $300 to $350, depending on what I got to put into them. And I can't compete. I can't compete to this stuff. Even the Yukons, I am so disappointed in them. A lot of their parts are made in China, but they're assembled in the United States, but they're made in China. This is a Yukon posi right here. So let's dive into this and let's start looking at it, because I took this apart. I didn't buy this. I built a 12 bolt for a guy in a Camaro, and he was going to go with an 8.5 posi. 28 spline, came out of a Nova as a donor car. And he was running a big block, and he says, I said, you put a 12 bolt in it. This car either came with a 10 by 8.2 or 12 bolt, and with a 12 bolt, you'll get more money for it if you ever decide to sell the car down the road. So that's what we decided to do. So let's go into this. Let's dive in this thing a little bit deeper. Now, I've done this for years, and what I do, just like a crankshaft, is I can wrap on the carrier, and I can tell how the materials is made out of. Hear the difference? A lot cheaper materials. Auburn has probably one of the highest grade material they use in their carriers. It's probably because it's a cone shape, so you got a lot of metal to metal. Auburn actually was Borg Warner, and Borg Warner sold the patents to Auburn. But if you have an Auburn carrier and try to drill through the case, it's pretty, you'll dull a drill bit out. But anyway, these cases here, especially when they were first started coming out, they used to crack. Really, really notorious for cracking right in through here, along through the cross shaft. The cases were very, very sharp. They're not as sharp anymore. It looked like they've kind of wizened up to them cracking. Depending on the case, some of them are oval or round. Some are egg shape, like this Eaton here. Most of the Eatons were all egg shape. 12 bolts, they either had an egg shape or they had a small square window. The early 3 Series had a small square window and shared that with the 4 Series carriers. But overall, very disappointed. But it was pretty much given to me. I gave him a little bit of money for it, but not much. But anyway, let's dive into this so you can understand a little bit more. Okay, so the clutches sit along this face here, and it's completely machined flat all the way across until it drops into the side gear journal, all the way flat across. If you look at this one here, it's flat until it gets about right there, then it drops. And before you get into the side gear journal. This distance from here to here is probably 25 to 30 thousandths. It's got a little shelf right here. You see that? Don't like that. Not at all. And I will explain the reason why. When these clutches are inside the housing or inside the carrier and they're compressed so they compressed all the way the whole complete surface. When you have a shelf like that, what happens is you have a compressed force all the way up to about right there. And the rest of this does not have a shelf or a place where it can actually be compressed. So what it does with the clutches is it causes the clutches over a period of time, they'll start to bow. Now they'll also bow if your clutch pack is loose. But most typically, this here, I don't know why they did that. I have absolutely no reason why they did that. That was the first thing that I saw. The second thing that I saw is the thrush washers. Now, these are 10-17 tooth combination. So there are 17 teeth on the side gears, 10 tooth on the pinion gears. It's adequate. It's good. Yeah, if we want to compare it to old school 12 bolt, which is basically from 1965, 10 bolt 8.2 also. They had 18 teeth on the side gears, 10 teeth on the pinion gears. The teeth are actually smaller, so you have less contact compared to a 10-17, larger spiders. And of course, it did a Copo, which was a 10-16, but I'm not going to get into that today. Now, the first thing I noticed is the Pinion thrush washers are the captured design. But they move around a lot. A lot. Same thing here. They move around. If I compare it to a factory, Eaton, look at that. Barely moves. Now this is a newer design. It's the captured. It's got a captured thrush washer. Holds that thrush washer in place. So you may ask me, well, what's the difference? Well, we already know that the old school design, whether you had the old 12 bolts or 10 bolts that had the bronze thrush washers that were oil pregnated, or the steel, what would happen is over a period of time, the thrush washers basically not really held or captured by anything. And the thrush washer would actually start to, because of the inertia of the way it's spinning, cause the thrush washer to actually start running on one side. And it generally elongates the thrush washer out larger. And this machine surface that's actually right there is supposed to hold it in place, allows it to start walking back and forth. And when it starts walking back and forth, it's actually wearing also back and forth into a new surface, which if you're ever setting these differentials up, you notice that when you set your backlash between your spider gears, that one side's a little tighter and one side's a little looser. And of course, this is the drive side, but you'll notice that it's a little looser because this side's worn more than the opposing side. The other thing that I've noticed about a lot of these aftermarket carriers is this side gear bore journal. Now, the Eatons are all nice and smooth. This here is rough. It's like you can see the cutting marks into it. And on this side here, you can see that when they were cutting it, it almost looks like the cutter was actually bouncing. And it's a lot rougher. Don't like that. Eaton's, this is a used case, but they're nice and smooth. Even when the brand new ones from the factory, they're nice and smooth. They're not rough. So the other thing I've noticed also on some of these cases, you got to be really, really careful. I would not buy one of these. I would stay strictly with a real Eaton, not an aftermarket one. But a lot of times you'll take the side gear and you put the side gear into the bore, and what happens is it walks around too much. So the side gear bore is already too large. And if that happens, all it's going to do is cause this side gear to start walking around on those pinion gears. Before you know it, it'll destroy your spider gears. This is also a good indication. If you take your carrier apart, take all the clutches out of it, put your side gear, drop your side gear back in. If you drop your side gear back in and you grab it from side to side and you can move it back and forth, it goes this way here, back and forth, or this way. Look at your side gear bore. If your side gear bore is damaged, then that generally means that you have a bent axle housing. The axle tube is bent. And it'll tell you what side's bent. It could be both or it could be one. A lot of guys will take a carrier or housing. Let's see if I can show you. They'll take a housing and they'll weld it right here. If they weld it right there, you better get it straightened. Because what will happen is it'll actually take that axle tube as it cools, it'll start bending it one way or the other. And what it does, it puts a load on your side gears inside the journal, and it kicks it. And that starts your premature wear. Okay, going back. The next thing that I noticed is the ring gear bolts. I look at the ring gear bolt holes. A lot of the ring gear bolt holes in these aftermarket cases are drilled too large. And for an example, this is a 10-8.5. They use a 7/16 bolt. Remember, they're left-hand thread. 20 thread. 7/16, left-hand thread. But the later model ones will have serrations on the bottom side of the head. Use these. If you take a rear end apart and it doesn't have these serrations on them, throw them away. Buy a new set of bolts through GM. Should have a shoulder on it too. If it doesn't have this shoulder here, and you buy a bearing kit and you're buying new bolts and it doesn't have that shoulder, here's a 10 bolt 8.2 12 bolt. See the shoulder that's on it? You need that shoulder. You need it. If you buy bolts and it doesn't have the shoulder, throw them away. Don't use them. The reason why I dropped the bolt is this shoulder goes into the carrier and there's an interference fit. Notice that? Interference fit. That's so that the ring gear that's on the carrier doesn't rock back and forth. Now, sure, you got a clamping force because you got 10 bolts that are clamping that ring gear down. But you got to remember, under heavy acceleration, deceleration, you have a tendency of taking the ring gear, walking the ring gear back and forth on the carrier. And then when that happens, your ring gear will start to gall. And when it galls, it'll leave high spots in the carrier. Not a good thing. Okay? So when we look at this carrier, first thing I notice, the ring gear moves around. That's not good. It's not supposed to be like that. There's no interference fit. So that was another reason why I went away with that case, or decided not to use the case. So, here's another issue. Spider gears. If I didn't mention it already, 18 tooth, 65 to 71. This is a 12 bolt, smaller. 17s are larger. These are more preferred. So I took the side gear and I went ahead and I mic'd it. And I checked everything out, and everything looked good, you know, as far as the side gear journal, the height, the C-clip. Now let's go into the C-clip real quick. That's the C-clip. That's the factory C-clip. That's the correct distance. I've already mic'd it. It's correct. It's cut to the right depth. Factory C-clips are 0.150 thickness. That's what they're designed. That's what they were. Now, back in the day, in the GM parts books, you can actually get thicker C-clips. What the C-clips do is when you have your axle, C-clip, lock in place, your cross shaft rides across here. And what happens is you're able to take the axle shaft and you can move it in and out of the axle housing. Okay? And so what these did is not only retained it, but you're able to adjust the thickness of your C-clip to adjust your axle shaft in play. I like to keep it down about 10 thousandths. Now, they do make, through Dorman, they do make C-clips. And if you notice here, they are two different thicknesses. Copper is 0.150, and your silvers are 0.155. So that gives you 5 thousandths more to eliminate the axle shaft in play. But again, it's mostly on the axle shaft. You see this axle shaft here. It's worn. I wouldn't use it. It's just what I use for putting posi tracks, clutches together, and check everything out. But going back to this Yukon, okay? I took the side gear and I put the side gear onto the axle shaft. Then I went in and I rocked it back and forth. And I went, oh my gosh, that is a lot of play. So I put a dial indicator on here and I mic'd it. I come up with 45 thousandths. Not good. Because I thought to myself, either I'm going to roll these splines, or I'm going to take the side gear as it's being rolled and it's going to split the side gear. So I took a factory side gear and I put it on there. I checked it. And I mic'd it. 5 thousandths. That's all I got. 5 thousandths. 45 thousandths. It's way too much. The other issue that you have to be concerned about is you have backlash between your ring and pinion gear. You got backlash between your pinion gears and your side gears. And now you got another 45 thousandths on your axle shaft spline. So what do you think that does to your differential when you put it in a gear? Clunk, 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 clunk. All this does is add to it. And if you're sitting at a dead stop and all of a sudden you're accelerating, remember you got 45 thousandths or 40 thousandths more slop in your differential. I'm not going to use them. It's junk. So the next thing I notice is the clutches. They're Ray Bestis clutches. I don't like them. The problem is with Ray Bestis clutches is when this material wears, and I'll show it to you briefly. As soon as I find one. And the new Eaton that come with Ray Bestis clutches, when this material wears, it's very, very abrasive. And this material, when it gets very, very abrasive, it gets into the gear oil, gets into the bearings, and again, if this is your pinion gear, your cross shaft, the oil and the abrasive material in here, as this is rotating, it starts galling the cross shaft and the inside of your pinion gears. So this is one area you definitely want to look, because it'll start galling, and it's not because of not having enough additive, or the additive being or oil, the wrong oil in it, or whatever, or just being old. This will take them out very, very quick. Very, very nasty to rebuild. Stuff gets in your skin, so I'm always wearing gloves. It's just nasty. The other thing too, these clutches weren't soaked. They were supposed to be soaked in some type of a friction modifier, limited slip additive. There's like your Ford friction modifier, slip lock. They're making a GM, they're making a Dana Spicer, but this is what I use. This is the best of the best of the best. If you want to use something like a friction modifier from Ford or Dana or GM, they stink. That don't stink. That's what I use for gear oil. That's my gear oil. And it's all petroleum based. Okay? Now, if you have a old school Eaton posi, 65 to 71 or 64 truck, you're going to have an all steel clutch. And this one here is still good. For how many years of service? Still good. You'll get, let me say this. Out of these two here, the carbon fiber will be more superior. But you'll probably get, realistically, maybe 10 years on this clutch. This one here, your life expectancy just went down. At least half. These aren't my ideal. I don't like them. If you buy a brand new Eaton posi, you're going to get one of these. Carbon fibers. They come with 400-pound spring plates, which I haven't got into yet, and I will discuss in a minute. Now, the older style, which I'll just set right there so you can see, that's the older style. Or the older style was this design. They reversed it. There you go. They reversed it. This here design certainly has more friction surface across the clutch. That's half the friction surface. I don't know why they did it. Is it that expensive? Carbon fiber? Now, if we want to go older, when they first came out, they were, let's see if I can find it. No, I can't find it. So I will look for it. Anyhow, so when I took this apart, the first thing I noticed, they weren't oil soaked. The other thing I noticed is this is the clutch shim. And there is a very, very sharp ridge. You see it right there. When these were stamped. And they never radiused them. Ooh, they're sharp. So that's what you get. So if you're going to buy one of these, make sure you take it apart, inspect it, soak your clutches, clean that sharp off. Here's the factory Eatons. You buy these in your clutch kits. Very, very, very good shims. Nice. They're generally in 5,000s up to 55,000s. Maybe 60, but I think it's 55. But they're in 5,000 increments, and they give you 2 each when you buy a clutch kit. So when you buy a clutch kit, you can either buy the ones through Eaton, which is this design, which is the carbon fibers, which require the 400-pound spring plates. If you're using these, you have to use the 800-pound, which is this beautiful Yukon, purple springs. But when I started looking at this, I noticed that there's still sharp edges. See that? Sharp. Not only that, but I also looked at the springs, and I'm going, the spring plate is already bent. It's bent. So I put a straight edge across it, and it is bent. Then I started looking at the springs, and I went, oh my gosh, look at that. These springs are supposed to be ground flush or ground flat. They're not. They're not ground flat. So when I took this, if I didn't have these zip ties on here and I took the plate off and I laid the plate and then I just put the springs on top of it without putting the plate on top, these springs settle cattywampus. One would be to the right, to the left, one forward, one backward. The only thing that keeps them in kind of in line is putting the other plate on top. Absolutely junk. Because the spring loads aren't even from top to bottom. So here's a Eaton 800-pound. Look how they're ground flat. Look at that. That's what they should look like. And again, you pay for what you buy. You want something cheap, you get something cheap. You want something good, you get something good. You get something that's going to last. And that's what I'm trying to express here. Okay? Now, excuse me. These are 800 pounds. These are your 400 pounds. These are 300 pounds. These 300 pounds were in basically your high performance Camaros, big block cars, 427s, 454s. These have 9 coils. If you count them, there's 9. 300 pounds. These are discontinued. They don't make them anymore. 400 have 7 coils. You can count them. 7. These are 800. 5 coils. And then, of course, I don't have one together, but these are your normal 200-pound spring pack for 10 coils. Okay? Now the 200 spring pack is still available through Eaton. It's part number 29589-00S as in Sam. The 400 is 29590-005 or S for the 400 pound. Okay, if you have the 400 pound, you got to use it with these. If you are using Rebestus, 800. Factory steel clutches. You could go up to 400, but generally these are 200 and 300 pound. That's what the factory recommended. That's what the factory did. They do make them in 18 clutch pack, all steel. And they also make them in a 24 clutch pack. The 24 clutch pack is a little thinner, and it'll give you, I think, 4 extra friction surfaces. The only problem is with the thinner ones, they do have a tendency of taking the ears and bending the ears where the splines are at. 72 and up, 79 Corvette, Pontiac Buick Olds, 8.875, the ones that everybody used to grab and think were 12-bolt posies and found out that they're not. These here were designed for slots to get oil in between the clutches, because when people were changing the oil, they were using like a GL6, GL5, GL4, and they didn't put the additive in. So that what happened is they started chattering. But under high-performance applications, they split right here. And then once they split or crack, then they spread apart, and then before you know it, they'll start breaking off into 3-4 pieces, sometimes more. But these aren't ideal clutch. These are, generally I just throw them away. Sometimes I'll keep them if they're really, really nice. I mic them all. And I'll save them. Maybe somebody wants me to put something together because their clutches are burned up. But if you're interested in the 18 clutch pack, all steels, which is this guy right here, all steels, they are part number 29403-00S. If you're interested in the 24, the thinner clutches, part number is 29402-00S. So much better clutch, much better clutch. Drag racing, high performance cars, nice street car, good camshaft in it, run these. You got a little city car, something you just want a little posi track, run these. Like I said, buy a new Eaton posi carrier, take it apart, put steel clutches in it, change your spring plates or your spring plates and your clutches. Now you got an old school posi. But again, the most issues that I see are ring gear bolts, carriers known to crack. Be careful of the side gear journals because some of them are too large, and this one here is rough, so I know it's going to wear. It's not going to last long. And especially these side gears. Way too much. Way too much. Let me show you real quick This is a Nitro. This is made by Nitro. This is a 12-bolt posi made by Nitro. I went ahead and built this one up and got ready to install it, put new carrier bearings on it and everything. And then when I got to the ring gear bolts, I noticed the same thing. Too loose. So the only thing I have to do is I'm going to have to drill these out, put a bushing in here, go 7/16 to a 3/8 bushing, put bushings in here to secure it. The other thing I noticed is when they machine this, they machine this really, really deep. And you can see how that just is pretty bad. The problem is, if I do drill this out and bushing it, I have to use a special ring gear bolt, something that has a shoulder on it. And again, it has to be, I have to have serrations on it. Or use a, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it's a nitro. As you can see, nitro right there. What I was talking about as far as the ring gear rocking back and forth on the carrier is if you look at that one there, you'll see it. It's what happens when the ring gear walks back and forth on the carrier. Now, it's got high and low spots. And all it does is just subtly just move back and forth. So, it's really important that when you're building a differential or you're buying something on the internet or through a performance shop, that you know exactly what you're buying. Maybe I'll do a series on Dana power locks, because there are a lot of issues with these new power locks. But that's pretty much it for the day. I'll see you soon.